Outer Orange.
Gamers, card gamers, welcome back to another video. Outer Orange here. As you guys know, Bushiroad just ended for OverDress, and yes, I commentated again. That was me, you know, doing my thing. I hope to see those VODs up on the official Bushiroad channel. If you don't know, the P and V VODs are up for all regions, so you can check those out. They are on the Bushiroad official channel. I'll leave a kind of like a link or something around for you for that, because they're really fun to watch. If you just want to see some awesome gameplay, you know, if you want to see an awesome commentator of some kind, couldn't tell you who. Just in general, you know, there's a lot of work and effort put into that, so you can check that out. So there's a lot of awesome, you know, everyone commentated really well, and there's just a bunch of amazing games, and it's just really good, you know, just to see competitive play in general, especially the, you know, going into the top 8 and all that stuff. So feel free to take a look at those in case you didn't know they existed. They do. We are here today to discuss good old overdress being the standard format. We just had official results. You know, Springfest was back in the day. This is the real deal here. We are 3 sets into the format. We got some amazing results. We're gonna talk about them today. I'm gonna kind of break it down into some systems. We're gonna talk about the meta, what it is, what it's looking like, what changed. We're gonna look at some pie charts. We did this whole pie chart thing, you know, like pie charts, and then I'm gonna go over the decks with you, but I'm gonna try and keep it a little bit brief with each one of these, and I'll give you guys kind of names. And again, just a big disclaimer, some of these are not in the proper order. I think the first like top 4 are, but then after that they kind of start being like in more random order. But I am gonna try it, but I am gonna have all the lists below, so you have access to all the lists between all regions, all the stuff, and we're gonna do that here. Discuss the meta real quick. What is overdress meta? What is it? Overdress meta is pretty much stuff like Bruce and Lorone. Those are like the top 2 decks that I think you can think of when you think what is overdress meta. You might think to yourself Bastion is up there too, which in my opinion, I think Bastion is actually a really good deck, and I was actually one of the people that was expecting to see Bastion top, and lo and behold, I was very surprised to see it not top. It has everything it needs to top, but the thing about it, now so do other decks, and I think that's where I kind of start falling off. I think big counterpart to this is actually Gravidia, and I think that also might have changed the meta a little bit. Personally, I actually think Gravidia beats Bastion, but what are Bruce and Lowen's weaknesses? They both have almost the exact same weakness. That weakness is that they are turn 4 type of style decks, meaning you ride to grade 3, you don't do too much, and then when you ride again, you know, Persona ride or just have another turn, you start doing stuff. And the reason being is both these decks start doing stuff later more than earlier. So if you play rush decks, any form of rush decks like that will start beating meta decks. And what is considered a rush deck? Well, a rush deck would be considered Gravidia. Another deck that kind of puts you on a clock is actually Barrow Magnus. Barrow Magnus says, hey, once I hit 15 soul, you have 1, maybe 2 turns max left before you're pretty much dead. If you rush Barrow Magnus doesn't have a weakness. You have to, if you rush it down. If you rush it down, they can't do much because they need their pieces in hand for soul. So they're probably going to take all the damage. But if they take all the damage, then you're kind of just increasing the chance of killing them if they're at 3-4 damage, essentially, right? Especially decks that have high pressure on their Vanguard swings, and typically being Zorga, Orphist, Gravidia. Those are like the best 3 I can think off the top of my head. Bar Saga kind of fits into this as well. We know with the extra crit and extra 23k every single turn, all that kind of stuff. So these are the kind of decks that you might see kind of push it down. But if you don't, or you can't, which Bruce and Lorone can't do, Barrow Magnus starts shining. The only couple decks that can actually fight it is Gravidia, but Gravidia does have a weakness to getting its rear guards knocked out. Like Gravidia also suffers. So you kind of see kind of a circle here. It's kind of like a circle forming, right? So like they kind of all have a way to beat each other, but they're all kind of the better decks, and then there's everything else. That's personally kind of where I think the meta is. That's where I kind of feel like it's fallen. But let's go ahead and look at the pie charts. Pie chart time. As you can see, we have a pie chart, and I am again using Fuzzy Paradox's pie chart just because I think they're the easiest to just use. AO's top 8, there were 6 Bruce, 1 Lorone, 1 Barasagara. So Barasagara is kind of the weirdest one in here, I think. And we also had 1 Bruce that had a Quinn Lu build, and I'll talk about the Quinn Lu build when we discuss it further. But Barasagara, though it isn't, you know, at its peak performance yet, it is a trial deck with a touch of either Eugene or a touch of, you know, overdress cards. Because of that, it's showing some results here. But it also has a constant front row retire mechanic that it can do, and I actually personally think the deck is like kind of up there. I don't think it's the best deck. I don't think it's as good as the main four, but I do think that it's actually not too far away. Just mainly because losing those front row rear guards every single turn can hurt you. And then, you know, on top of the fact that she can just deal you a damage, the crit pressure, the 23k. The only downside to the deck right now is the fact that it doesn't have really good powerful rear guards since a 3 attacking deck, but it has other things to kind of make up for it. Yeah, so this is our AO. Let's go ahead and look at EU. We got a little bit more of that Gravidia style, world Gravidia. We have three Gravidia, 2 of which are world and 1 of which is just the pure Gravidia. We have 2 Bruce, we have 2 Arone, and 1 Bear Magnus making it through. So this is like what EU looks like. So this is NA. Now NA was a little bit different. NA was larger. There was more people in NA. So you'll notice there's a top 16 here. So it is a little different, but I will go over kind of with you guys like between top 16 and I'll talk about top 8 and top 16, but I'll mainly focus on top 8 just to kind of keep it more like, you know, closer together. We have 5 Larone, we have 4 Bruce, 4 Gravidia, and 3 Bear Magnus in this one. Very interesting stuff to see. Again, the same 4 decks, the same board 4 decks did really well here, and we'll get into kind of why these decks are doing well. We're gonna just start from AO and then go to EU and then go to NA. So let's go ahead and do that. We're just gonna start with Moose Rex. This is Moose Rex. This is the champion, the person who got first place over in AO. So congratulations to you. Congratulations to everybody that did so well. But here we have Bruce. That is right. Here's Brucey doing Brucey things. Now let's talk about this deck. Probably should put our disclaimer. I always kind of forget to put these disclaimers until I'm like to actually talk about the decks. Bruce is one of the few decks that I barely play. Like I barely play this, but I do have a lot of experience just from watching it and facing against it. So I'll actually be able to discuss here kind of a little bit. I might have a little bit more trouble explaining text, but that's pretty much the main it. But anyway, here we have the Bruce deck. Now this deck is actually pretty standard. I think the only thing here that might be a little bit different to someone is like this right here. It's like kind of like a little bit defense strat. This is the special violence yell to kind of add defense into the deck. But overall, we have the Marjorie, we have the Bruce engine, we have the Derricks, we have the Lenards, we have the Dober, and pretty much we have everything here. Got the draw, the fronts, the crit. So it is rainbow triggers, which is rainbow triggers, and you also run, of course, full dive. And this is kind of like the big questions. A lot of people tend to have trouble knowing which to go. Do you go for a full dive or do you go for the Pandemonium Tactics, I believe it's called, which has a little soul. But why is Bruce so strong? Well, part of it is literally this combo right here. Derrick lets you replenish a board and Leonard lets you retire your opponent's board. It is an extremely good combo together. And then you put it together with Protobulb and with Dober, you'll be able to you get to suck stuff in, bring stuff back, multi-attack with the Bruce engine by restanding, and it is just an overall strong engine. You add the Hell Dive, the full dive skill to get the extra 10k to your front row, and suddenly you are really strong and powerful, attacking for 33k type columns, on top of the fact that you're also hurting your opponent's board because Leonard says it can attack columns, so you can attack the front row unit and the back row unit and all that stuff, and that makes this deck insanely powerful. And a lot of people say, well, it's a turn 4 deck. It is, but you could still play around that concept. You can still call stuff out. You could call Marjorie out early if you want, you know, try to punish your opponent a little bit and then go into Bruce. You could tempo it out a little bit, and you do have a lot of these choices. The deck draws the deck goes through its deck pretty fast, so you kind of know what you're gonna go, what you get into, all this stuff. One thing I will note, something just caught my eye, they are running the normal over trigger here. They're not running the Dark States one. You might be asking yourself why. Well, the thing about it is Bruce doesn't really change their rear guards that often, especially since your opponent's not going to usually allow Leonard to hit. Leonard's right here. Usually people, if they truly don't want you doing anything super crazy, they usually won't allow Leonard to hit. They usually will have a certain board that will make Leonard a little bit easier to play around. But with that being said, since you're not going to be calling out new units, when you attack with Bruce, you restand 2 columns. If you hit the Prey Elemental over trigger, that means you get to put 100 million on one side and 100 million on the other side, which means that you will have a 200 million columns attacking. And honestly, I think it just kind of depends on player choice, because the Dark States over trigger gives you the 23k and the extra crit for the rest of the game, but you have to hit it, like the earlier you hit it, the more impactful it is, and the later you hit it, kind of doesn't matter. But other than that, I think that's pretty standard. I think I said enough. Congratulations. So this is Nut with another Bruce deck. This one has a touch of Quinlu. It's not like major, because there's actually some decks that ran like a huge Quinlu engine. This one isn't running the full Quinlu engine, but you'll notice that we are running Edens in this deck. We're already Eden in this deck. Eden restands with a crit, essentially. You can also retire every time it hits, and it can hit anything. It doesn't have to necessarily be Vanguard. But that's mainly the biggest, the little bit of the difference we're seeing here. They're only wanting run one Quinlu, so the chances of this actually being successful isn't too often. But you could, you know, you could proto ball it back, and you know, again, in a 5 attacking deck, having a guard restrict on top of that is really good. And the thing about Quinlu is that she says you could put her into soul, choose a rear, give it 2k, but then if you have 7 soul, your opponent cannot call grade 1 or greater cards from their hand to the guard circle for that battle. And you might think, why? It's for a rear guard, choose a rear guard. Now why does that matter? Well, if you look at something right here, PGs are grade 1s, so Quinlu shuts down PGs. If you try and perfect guard something, you literally won't be able to, and Bruce numbers do get pretty high. And if you want to say, I don't know, perfect guard a crit, a 2 crit, you can't do that. There's another reason why Bruce does so well. So the fact that the Bruce just has a lot of stuff, as multi-attack, as a toolbox up its soul, it has retire, it has a way to call back a board. There's some decks out there like Nvidia that say, hey, I'm gonna board wipe you, and then you have this card that exists that says, okay, cool, I'm gonna go do something anyway. And that's why Bruce is so potent. That's why Bruce has been topping as much as it has, because there's a lot of decks that can't stop Bruce that fast. That your literal condition is to try and rush it down fast enough before they can kill you, but that's easier said than done. There's a lot of decks that aren't capable of doing that. For example, a Mirror Bruce or a Will Roan. Like, these decks can't afford to do that kind of stuff. Anyway, on to the next deck. This here is Man Long with another Bruce deck. Obviously, AO is the most heaviest, I think, on the Bruce. We're seeing quite a little bit of Bruce. This deck is pretty similar to I think the first deck that we saw that Muzrak showed. It is a little bit more condensed, meaning it's got like the main stuff. But we kind of saw a deck like this. We're gonna go ahead and move on to the next one. So next we have Kiru 2011 with Barsagra. So this is Barsagra. This is the only Barsagra deck that we'll see, so we can kind of talk a lot about it a little bit in depth. So this deck is Barsagra, but with an overdress approach. This is actually a very, very solid approach to Barsagra. So you can kind of build Barsagra 2 ways. You can kind of have like this Eugene package where you kind of use Eugene to get yourself a little bit of soul, and you know, just do a little bit of Eugene stuff, or you can go the Arcs route, which is what we're seeing, the Verena route, which is what we're seeing here. So this deck is pretty much saying, hey, I'm gonna try and get to my condition as soon as possible, and then but on top of that, I'm gonna have this Vanguard that literally retires every turn, gets the arms, which are these down here, and then on top of that, I'm going to also have this thing smacking your face. Now this one is a little bit different. I am actually very surprised. This one runs the Valiente and the Urger, so this can enable like some pretty interesting stuff here. You can put a Trickstar down, put a booster behind to swing with it, and then ride the Urger and then go from there. And having that Valiente spice is actually really nice, like, because now you have to make a choice. Do you want this to hit, or do you want the Vanguard to hit? And actually adds a lot of pressure. It makes it hard for your opponent to want to guard. This is also actually a little interesting tech I like in here. It says when this unit attack hits, retire this unit, draw a card, choose one of your opponent's rear guards, retire it, so you can actually push even more retire in a deck that already retires quite a lot. So why is this deck potent right now? Why how did this deck make it through? It made it through because this deck, one thing right here, it's a shield. And literally it pretty much says one attack is just not gonna hit unless you like Persona Road and got 10k to your rear guard. One of the few exceptions is Bruce. Bruce can actually hit over the shield, but there's actually a lot of decks that can't deal with this. There's a lot of decks that are like, oh no, I can't, oh no, there's a lot of decks that will attack for between like 15 to like 20 or something like that, or 23 exactly, and the shield just really helps with survivability, and that's pretty much what's going on here. This card and make your opponent deal damage anyway, so your opponent can perfect guard your Vanguard and then still have to take a damage, and that can be very frustrating as the Vanguard itself also gains a crit after you retire. So you have a 23k attacking Vanguard with a crit on top of it pretty much every turn, and especially if you see your arms in time, like your sword in time, if you see like a couple copies of it, you can just keep doing that and just be annoying as long as your opponent's not at 5 essentially. And it can be beefy on top of the fact that the deck has a little bit of extra shield. They're running the Eugene support in here. It's kind of like Eugene support, but I think it's just meant for any Dragon Empire thing. But pretty much if your opponent's drop is just big, it just gains shield, and it's just a really nice card to have in your hand or as an attacker, because it can be also a booster on top of that as well. So just overall pretty good card. And overall this deck just has a lot of stuff that it can just do. It just exists, and it gets gets this consistent engine pretty quickly, but with the Arena engine, I actually think this deck is very capable. So congratulations, really good stuff. Let's go ahead and see our next deck. So this is Fry Steaks with Larone. This is the first Larone deck we see here, and we're probably going to see a ton more of these, so I may or may not kind of like go into detail with this. Larone is just overall like winning or succeeding because Larone has access to a guard restrict, high numbers, and a restand. It plays like a Bruce deck, but slightly different. The main thing is the restand, and the fact that you can restand and then, you know, have high numbers and the guard restrict. The guard restrict and the restand is kind of the big thing. Your Vanguard can attack for like 53k with a guard restrict active, like pretty much all the time, and you know, you can't usually, and a crit, by the way, and a crit. So usually you can't take 53k and be able to guard it. You know, there's only so many times you can use your front triggers or your crit triggers or whatever, and eventually because of that you're going to start losing. This deck is really strong late game but has a really weak early game, so it's another one of those decks that you want to try and rush down. Now we'll be seeing some kind of tech differences. The biggest tech difference will be how many orders the person runs and which unit they're playing here. So there is Audrey and then there's Harriet. That's usually the biggest difference. So a lot of people run Harriet, which gives you an extra 5k if you have 2 or more orders, so she becomes a 13k, or you can run Audrey, which is the same thing. If you have an order in your order zone, she becomes a 13k. Another biggest thing in the order zones, most people run between 8 and 9, and this one I believe runs 4. This one runs 9. This one runs 9, but some people run 8. It just kind of depends. It depends on how many rear guards you want. Usually the difference is like on the counter charger. Usually you'll knock down a counter charger to add an additional order, or you know, you can knock down one of these to add an additional order, whatever it is. But usually it's between 8 and 9. But the deck's just super successful. It has high shield through this card, and it just does its thing. This is a very good deck to take. It just survives so long, and it just starts killing you like crazy. We have Kevin Cho with another Bruce list. Now this Bruce list is actually pretty similar to what we've seen, so we're probably gonna, you know, we're probably not gonna go too far. I think the biggest difference here is they're running kind of like a mix of the orders with the defense order and the offense order here, but overall we're kind of seeing a similar engine of the Lenards, the Edens, and all this. But overall it does the same engine that we've kind of talked about, so we're gonna go straight into something. Ha, get it? It is literally something. Their name is something. Welcome. So here's another Larone deck. Now this one you'll see that they have the Audrey over the Harriets, but they also, and they're running 8 orders, as I mentioned, instead of 9. That's kind of like the player preference thing that comes in mind detail, but you kind of get the gist. And then lastly we have Jake. This is another Bruce deck, a very similar Bruce deck what we've seen. I don't see anything too different here from what we've already experienced. The only difference is the order difference here, but also congratulations to Jake and all this stuff. So good stuff. I'm not seeing anything too different here, so I'm not going to go too far, but again, just a similar engine of what we kind of already discussed. Let's go ahead and jump over to EU. All right, so now we are here. We're in EU. We're starting out with Space Mama, as they mentioned. This is Kent. This is the Gravidia deck. Now this one is the very different one from all the rest that we'll see. Actually, they're all kind of different, but this one is significantly different from the rest, as this one has a completely different game plan than the rest do. You'll notice that this is purest to the pure Gravidia. This is This is the 16 Gravidia Meteor deck that got first place in EU. You'll notice here that there's only 7 normal units that's not in the ride deck, and then the rest is just Meteors, Triggers, and Persona. So it's just wild to think how far this deck came. This is one of the few decks that I'm actually surprised was able to make it this far, mainly because of retire. And I'm not saying anything's wrong with the deck, but I feel like if you're facing decks that can retire you, then you're gonna have a tough time because you won't really have anything to call at some point. If you get double retired, or if you're facing a mirror match, I could definitely see where this deck can it's its weakness. But there's a lot of pluses. First of all, you draw like crazy. You get your meteors, which your meteors let you just soul charge and draw and just get a crit, all this stuff. Because this person is running literally all 16 meteors, you have no fear of just constantly pressuring your opponent every single turn, because you're not going to run out of steam that fast. You will run out of steam, but it's going to take a while. But by the time you run out of steam, hopefully you'll kill your opponent, and that's kind of the point of this deck. You're constantly just exploding on your opponent, literally raining meteors on them, and just kind of hoping to end the game. And that's what they're doing here. You persona ride, you deck then, you just go, and it got them the W. This is the pure definition of I'm gonna explode on your face and I'm gonna get my W. This is William with a Bruce. Now this one is running 1 Maple. or Mabel. It was very interesting to see. Mabel gives an extra drive, pretty much essentially to Bruce and all that stuff. Everything else is pretty standard, but they are running the Mabel in here. I guess just to secure, have an extra drive. You could put behind Vanguard and be like, all right, well I have a triple drive, and hopefully you can end game that way. Going on in, we have another Gravidia deck. Now this one is Kelvin. This is Kelvin's Gravidia deck. This is the world deck. Now a lot of WCC members took the world decks, and Kelvin is part of WCC as well. You have the Just the Jade. Now we can talk about this deck for a little bit because we actually haven't had the chance to see a deck like this. So pretty much what you're doing in this deck is, instead of riding the ride line, the normal Gravidia ride line we saw in Ken's build, you run the Orphis ride line to get yourself a world, and then you go into Gravidia. And essentially what you do is you have a grade 2 turn. What you're pretty much doing here is that you're going, all right, I'm gonna ride up, get my counter blast, and then I'm going to pretty much beat you down on turn 2, beat you down on turn 3, and then just go from there. Now the sacrifices the deck has to make is it has to run less meteors, and you're running kind of other units to kind of help with the power, like this guy right here, the bulldoze. You can counter blast, soul charge, get an extra 10k, making it 23k, which it can be a hard to guard. A persona rides 33k, and so on and so forth. And then you just kind of go from there. You are sacrificing the meteors, but you're in exchange getting an early game. Unlike the Kent deck we saw, where you pretty much drop down 5 meteors and have the double triggers activate. In this deck, you will not be seeing that, because this deck's main focus is you just constantly pressure you every single turn with attacks. That's just kind of how this deck works. So well, you do see, some might just ask why the Sojade is in here. It's in here because it's a 12k base. It can also be an early attacker. It does kind of start the minute this is active. So like once you have this in your order zone, the 12k does stay. You know, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think if you have meteors in there, you do lose the 2k, but you can just get it back by using your meteors and all that stuff. You just kind of go from there. Use that edge, and we do see the Wells in here. Wells is just a nice card. You can just literally not use the second part of its skill and just literally do the Soul Blast to draw 2. To do the Soul Blast to get 2k, which is just extra power in the board. Obviously we have the Stinger, we have the Stanner in here just for extra shield. We got the 1 copy of the Behringer, just for in case you hit it, you can just Soul Blast 3 draw, becomes a 10k as a rear guard, a 10k added addition, so it becomes 20k, and then, you know, behind a shield token and all that stuff becomes 35, and it's just a numbers game. You know, you could just do all this stuff. But yeah, getting that shield token early is really nice. Shield token is not shield token, I'm sorry, Shadow Army token. Shadow Army token is a 15k attacker, a 15k booster, and you can just do some funny stuff with it. It just gets really high. We do see the bone mines, it's just for a soul charge. But pretty much the game plan is you ride up. On turn 2, you start pushing. On turn 3, you push, and you just keep pushing until your opponent has to take an L. That's why these decks have been winning. You just keep pushing, and decks like this do fight Bruce and Larone really well. I think they even can fight Gravidia. I mean, they can even fight Barrow pretty well. They just start struggling against Barrow a bit more, because the Gravidia does struggle against Retire, because they're running orders and all this other stuff. There's less room for normal units, and you don't really have a way to revive like Zorga does and stuff like that. So it is kind of its downside, and considering Barrow Maggots can literally board wipe you every single turn once they hit their 15th soul, you are kind of on a clock against a deck like that. But otherwise, against the main bad boys like Bruce and Larone, this deck has no problem beating it. So that's why we saw it. That's why we see it's been topping. Next nice stuff. Good job, Kelvin. Next, we have George with a Larone list. Now, this one is very focused on the grade 4. On the grade 1 that gets the extra 5k and all that stuff, and they just kind of could trim down on the counter charging units. They are running 8 of the orders over 9, so we just kind of see pretty much the main difference. Now we've already seen kind of the Larone list. We do got the LSR, I love the LSR, but oh my gosh, I never noticed the little cat girl balloon. Oh, that's so cute. Or the little cat girl things. Anyway, sorry, getting distracted, but anyway. Nice stuff. You know, I do like to see that this early push. You can start early pushing with a card like this. It's something I actually didn't realize when I was commentating. You can drop these down as AK attackers and actually start pushing with them. So it was something you can't do with Audrey, by the way, which is the grade 2. You can't do that with her, but you can do it with this card. You can do it with this. So this is something to keep in mind. You can start rushing. That's another reason probably they're running 4 copies, because you can just put it down and start going. Notice that the counter charge girl is a 6k, so you can't do that with her, but you could do that with Harriet. It's David with another Larone deck. Pretty similar stuff. We are seeing, instead of the Harriet, the Audrey's in here. Again, similar stuff, but that is David. Let's go ahead and go to Nuno. Now Nuno is running a almost full Gravidia deck with a little bit of the world touch. So this one is not as techy as like some of the other ones had. Not as techy as WCC one we saw, which had a little bit more of the tech options. This one is more standard, has more of the meteors, but it still gets the world order like early on, so you can still have a grade 2 game. You can kind of like just pick and choose like kind of like where you want to do that, and then you go into just pretty much regular Gravidia, because they're even running the normal like the normal grade 2 Gravidia for the extra draw and all that stuff. So they did just go this route. It obviously succeeded. We have Marcus. This is with Bear Magnus deck. So we haven't actually talked about Bear Magnus yet, so we can kind of, you know, get into it here. So this is the Bear Magnus deck. Nice stuff. So Bear Magnus is, this one's a pretty much a soul charging engine, and I am seeing a bit of a soul charging engine. I'm gonna talk about the two anomalies in here first, or actually the 3 anomalies in here, actually 4 anomalies here. This one's actually a little different from a standard Bear Magnus deck. So this one runs the normal soul charging engine, which we see with the Selfish Engraver, the what's it called, this is the Expeller, and then you have Curtis, and then you have all that stuff. But there is some differences here. So one, they're running the guard restricts. So this says when this unit attacks Vanguard, if your soul is 10 or more, you can count by soul blast until the end of the turn when your opponent would call 1 or more cards. They would call something the guard circle that's called 2. So it's a little bit of a guard restrictor. Instead, they're not running the Gumon. So they're running this instead, actually. I do think that this is a very interesting kind of option, because you can still give the guard restrict, and it's a 13k attacker, and it'll be 23 when you call it out on top of the guard restrict, all the stuff. It is the counter blast I think is a little heavy, but you know, I think with Gumon you also have to counter blast to do its thing as well. So it doesn't really matter. Once you knock deck out, and she gets really big really fast. It's just a card that you just pretty much can call out, not have to lose your deck, and then you can just go into it, and you know, just it gets really high. It gets really big and really strong. We do have like that soul charging engine here. You can also, you know, soul blast this out with the counter blast essentially, and soul charge again. They get an additional 10k to your Vanguard, so you have the option to just make your Vanguard bigger. Selfish Engraver is the card talked about a lot. When it hits you, soul charge. You can also, when at the end of battle attack, you could put the soul if you have 10 more cards. The counter charge is a really good solid staple. Now we will notice that something down here is very different. There is not a tactics at all. No tactics at all. This deck is running the Extraction instead, which lets you pick a card from your soul play back to hand if you have 10 or more soul. It soul charges 3, and you do have to discard 4 and all that stuff. And then also they're running Brother's Soul, so they chose a little bit differently with their soul engine. Most run the tactics card, but they're deciding to just run this instead, and I applaud them for that. It's a little different. I actually wasn't expecting to see this list to be like this. I was expecting it to be a little bit different, but I like it. I think this is a good strategy. Just add this 15 soul condition. This deck gets very lethal very fast. This deck gets very Oonga Boonga very quickly, and the Vanguard has a crit and an additional 10k on top of a 5 attacking deck. This deck you're sacrificing the fact that you have to soul charge half your deck for the fact that you're just going to become a really hard to guard Vanguard, essentially. That's pretty much what you're sacrificing, but it works, right? So that's what we have here. Our last deck is a Bruce deck. It's pretty standard. I'm not seeing anything too different here. You know, I'm seeing the draws, I'm seeing the crits, I'm seeing the fronts, kind of like the same. We have an order system going on here, so I'm gonna go too deep. But this is Aaron. Congratulations, Aaron, for another Bruce deck making it through. Bruce is a really hard. I know I've been starting to go through the Bruce decks, but I do want it to be known, Bruce is a really hard deck to master and play. So big props to people that did take Bruce and succeed with them, because Bruce takes a lot of time to master. You do need to think through all your actions. Bruce is an amazing deck to take. Let's go and talk about NA. I'm gonna talk about the top 8. I'm gonna tell you when the top 8 bracket stops essentially, and then we'll talk about the other 8, so like from the top 16, just to kind of, you know, where the difference is, like where it stops being top 8, stops being top 16. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so we do have quite a lot of tabs here. We got 16 tabs with 16 wonderful people. Let's go ahead and start. We're gonna start with the champion, Luke. So this is Luke with Bear Magnus in this deck. Something that we actually saw in the previous Bear Magnus deck we didn't see the Ashrada. So this deck does run it. So that's probably the biggest difference we'll touch upon here. But so this is the champion for NA. They took Bear Magnus and they succeed with it. We saw them in the top 8. Like, I was commentating this, I was commentating a lot of these matches, so I actually be able to kind of give a little bit more in-depth analysis of some of these. But this is a very, very strong deck. The person was very analytical with their choices of what they call it a soul when they hit their 15 soul. Like the 2 cards they call out, they were very analytical with their choices. I know sometimes they made specific choices based off the specific decks they faced, so like big props to that. It was nice to see that. But overall, overall, the deck kind of functions in a very similar way. The biggest difference here between what we saw already is the fact that they're running the Ashtar and they're running the Pandemonium Tactics, which is what Card talked about. You pretty much don't do anything. None of these really matter. You're actually here for the Soul Charge 4. So this deck has the Soul Charge 4 skill. I mean, you can use the Soul Charge 4 and then do everything else, but pretty much you need the 4 soul to just hit Barrow as quickly as possible as you want the 15 soul condition. Essentially, this deck has the defense because you can actually start guarding with these early and then put them into soul, and then you also have the offense where you start soul charging like crazy, and then you're just an unkill. You just become a slaughter machine. That's essentially what we saw on stream and what this deck was doing, and that's why it was winning. You reach your soul as soon as possible, and then you just start winning. You have your crits, you have your 5 attacks, all this stuff, and depending what you call is very important, as it does make a difference. You'll notice that this deck in particular runs the draws and the crits, and pretty much just that's it. I do find draws a little bit spooky, but you know, when you have a card like this, you don't have to worry about the draw as much because you're not going to deck out. So just very interesting stuff overall. Very good deck. But that is Luke. Let's go and talk about Adrian's. This is Adrian with Bruce, the person that faced Luke that we saw, and they did really well. This is also like a very fun to see. I actually didn't know this is I didn't really process, but they have one Eden as their tech, one little Eden in there. That's really interesting to see. And then we also obviously have the rainbow triggers going on here, and we have the order here. Now you will notice that this person actually runs more orders than normal. They're running 4 of the full dive, and they're running 3 of the special violence as well. So there's 7 orders, something that I actually thought was very interesting to see. You don't normally see 7 orders in the Bruce deck, but they chose that this is just what I need, and you know, having the shield is just really nice. Next we have Derek Dow. This is Derek Dow with the WCC Rocks deck. Again, we've seen pretty much this list already, so we saw it in action. Now Derek Dow actually was going like 9-0 in the Swiss rounds, so this was insane to watch just how far he came, like from day 1 into day 2, and then you know, now he's here taking 3rd place. Very good stuff. Very good. I believe they took 3rd place. I get the placings are a little weird to me because I don't have the full order except for EU, but regardless, this was just really well. We talked about this list a little bit, but you know, we hear this again. Congratulations, good stuff to see. Let's go into our next deck here. We have another Lerone deck. So this is, I believe, Zistral. Yeah, this is Zistral. This is Zistral's deck, and he did take the so Zistral took the Audreys over the Harriets. I guess to them, I guess the Interceptor just mattered a little bit more, but overall, it's a pretty standard deck. They are running 8 orders, and they're just going with that. Sometimes there's a little bit of a trigger difference. I haven't really talked about the triggers too much, but sometimes people run more draws and less crits. Actually, this is one of them. They're running 7 crits and 4 draws. And something I do want to note, Lerone needs to see their winter order as soon as possible, so running that extra draw could be actually very useful. Crits are nice, but your Vanguard gets a crit anyway. You do kind of want to see your winter order, because if you don't see your winter order, that crit's not going to matter that much because you're just a 3 attacking deck with a crit. Next we have, now this one is a little bit different. This is actually Maxime's list, also taking the Gravidia Rocks with a couple of changes. So this one, we can talk about this one a little bit here because they did make a couple changes. One thing I do want to note is the 1 Bulldoze. I am so for this, it's not even funny. I actually hate this card. I've been seeing this card in Japanese lists here and there, like in pure video lists, people have been running this, and I'm not a fan of it, not gonna lie. So the fact that Solo ran this at 1, I 100% support this. I'm testing World Gravidia right now, and I refuse to put a 2nd copy in. I just don't like this card enough. Gravidia World as well, like the same concept, you know, you have your 2 Orphis and you go into Gravidia. We do have the 1 copy of that extra little poke, you know, it can become a 20k on rear, you get an extra draw, all that fun stuff. Now let's talk about the promo. A lot of people were very surprised to see this promo. It's pretty much just a 15k attacker. If you have a set order in your zone, you can Sopas get 5k. Sopas isn't really a problem in this deck. It just becomes a 50k attacker. It's just another way to meet your condition. Something to note, because there's less meteors in this deck, this condition right here, this 50k condition, will not be met that fast. And because of that, you run cards like this to kind of help with that. You can just Soul Blast and then just get your 15k anyway to make that grade 2 rush matter. And that's actually why Solom is running essentially this card along with this card. If he had more meteors in his deck or something like that, he could probably get away with running like more of these and, you know, more of these. But because of that, because you're gonna have a vanilla, because this card will be a vanilla until you have 5 of the meteors both in your order zone and either between your order zone and your drop zone. You're usually usually won't see it super early. Like getting 5 meteors even in a pure Gravidia deck early is kind of hard. So you can imagine how it could be even harder to do in a half and half type of deck. So that being said, that's why these are in here. You also notice that there is a Thumperino in here. This is a world deck, so actually running Thumperino isn't too weird, as Thumperino does work with this card because you do get a Shadow Army token, and because he's even running 2, you have an even higher chance of being able to use Thumperino's skill. Thumperino, I've been talking about Thumperino with a army token for a while now. It is a 38k attacker if you use the skill, and that sounds like to me, that's actually one of the reasons why I was expecting Orphis to have a top somewhere, because in Orphis you can do that a little bit more consistently, but a 30k attacker on turn 2 is really high. You don't have to obviously activate it. It will become 23 if you don't, but she literally gives 15k to your Shadow Army token, so it makes it a 38k attacker in total with the boost of Thumperino and everything, and you get a draw. You literally board wipe yourself and get a draw, and the board wipe sounds kind of weird, but against decks like Bruce and stuff like that, you may want a board wipe. So it's actually pretty good. It's actually a solid pick. In here this is more like more of a choice of, if I hit it, I do it, and if I need to, I do it type of thing. Like, it's not mandatory in here, but I feel like Thumperino is really nice. I think it's really good in here. I do see why this is here instead of Wells, because like Wells is just kind of like, oh, I get 2k, yada yada. I could potentially get 2 more orders into my order zone with the meteors, but you're not running that many meteors. You're only running 9, and with 9, Wells skill isn't going to activate that often. But Thumperino, you can just leave it there as an 8k attacker, or you can use its skill and just, you know, board wipe itself, especially against decks like Baron Magnus. This is actually really good. Decks that can mirror matches where they're gonna touch your stuff anyway. So that's pretty much that's Maxine's deck. Congratulations. Let's go ahead and go to our next one. This is Jonathan. So Jonathan, this is Jonathan Eller. This is the one with the Quinn Liu touch, with the Eden touch. So this is good. This is good stuff here. I got really excited about this because I really like the Quinn Liu touch. I don't think we got a chance to see it on stream, but pretty much this is a Bruce deck, but with the touch of the guard restrict and touch of the crit pressure. Now it's Jonathan. Let's go and talk. This is Cue Ball Gamer. Again, the Audrey over the Harriet, and then we also have the 8 orders, and that's pretty much it here. I don't see anything else that's too different. Nuno is also an NA, again with the same list. So we saw Nuno already. Congratulations, Nuno, for, you know, being able to top in both regions with a more pure video with a touch of the world stuff. So good stuff to see here. This is now officially the 9th and so on. This is 9th through 16th, so this is no longer top 8. This is Tsujima playing. We saw this on stream. I actually really liked this list. Now this list runs the supernatural extraction here. So essentially what they're trying to do is to try to, so Tsujima wanted to have the ability to again use your soul. Other than that, we are seeing a similar engine of soul charging, but we've kind of already seen a list like this, running the tactics as well to kind of push. But good job, Tsujima. Next we have Tyler Wu with I don't know the exact, sorry, but again another little deck with the running the Audreys, running a little bit more of the orders. And then this is going for full crit pressure here. We have 7 Eraser 7 with another Baron Magnus list. This one runs that shield engine. We do see the Gumon here. We actually haven't seen the Gumon yet, but this is the first deck, the first list we've seen with the Gumon. Gumon pretty much adds a engine of guard restrict. So when it goes into soul, you can counterblast and pretty much give guard restrict for the rest of the turn. And with Baron Magnus, you do that after your first 2 attacks. So on your Baron Magnus attack, you activate the guard restrict, essentially saying, hey, for the next 3 attacks, you have to guard twice. So that's what the Gumon's doing. You have to hit the Gumon fast enough for this to fully activate, but the Gumon is pretty good. But other than that, good stuff. Next we have CP104. This is one of my favorite decks that I saw on stream. This is the Quinn Liu ultimate deck. So what we saw was like a touches of Quinn Liu as text. In here, Quinn Liu is like a main card, along with Eden being a main card. No Leonard whatsoever. They're running the Bryans instead for the extra crit pressure, and they're running the tactics for even more crit pressure. I mean, even more soul and everything else. And pretty much this deck is just a beatdown turn 4 deck. You are going to be taking crits and crits and crits to the face, because everything here will pretty much give you crits on top of the perfect guard restrict on top of that. So you will have an Eden swing at your face for 25, for 20, for 23, 33, whatever the number is, on top of a crit on it, on top of a guard restrict on it, and it's going to restand and it's going to do it again. So you literally can't perfect guard. The only thing you can perfect guard is the Vanguard, and that's pretty much it. Everything else you have to purely guard, and this is pretty much the condition of this deck. This is how it wins. So this is Parad. So another, this is a WCC deck? I don't know if they're part of WCC, actually. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. This is, I don't think they're part of WCC. I'm pretty sure they're not. But regardless, this is another world deck. Now this one is pretty standard to what the WCC stuff ran. They just have a little bit extra order. They have one extra of the media order, but everything else is kind of the same. We've kind of seen this list already, and they do run the shade and everything. So that we've already kind of seen this list. I'm not gonna go too far into it, but you know, it does. One thing I do know, and I still need an answer. They run draws, and prod, if you are in here, I would like to know the draw choice. I'm just curious. I am just actually curious why you pick draws over fronts. If you could tell me, I would love to hear like the full thought process behind it. I'm like legitimately very curious. We are second from the last deck. This is JP1155 running another Larone deck. This one focuses on the Harriet over the Audrey, and I believe they have 9 orders in here. Last deck we have is Ed Crimson with another Bruce deck. This is looks like a pretty staple Bruce deck as well. Pretty much it. That's the decks, guys. That was a lot of talking. It was 32 deck lists that I just went through. Woo! 32 deck lists. Congratulations, everybody. Y'all did amazing. I hope you guys enjoyed the little bit of a breakdown for all the decks. Hope it kind of helped you see like what's going on in set 3 overdressed. We have a good bit of set 3 overdressed still to go. So taking any of the decks that's kind of top to your locals or any other events from here until set 4 starts would probably not be a bad idea. Probably see a lot of success here. Hope this video was informative to you. Hope it helps you. All the deck lists are below, so you have access to all the lists. Hope you trip BRO. Bureau is still going. Vice Force is happening, so you can check out Vice Force as well on this upcoming weekend, so check that out if you're into Vice Force and all that fun stuff. On that, guys, I'm gonna head out, gonna say my goodbyes. Congratulations to everybody. I'll see you guys next time for whatever video I do that is next. So yeah, you know the drill. Peace out. До свидания. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.